Turkey. Others may still go towards Azerbaijan or Armenia. And this is going to be a refugee crisis. And there's a question in some countries whether they can handle this. So this is one of the other concerns. In addition, there is another danger. The danger is that if it escalates, we might see other countries becoming involved in the conflict. And this is what I think far more dangerous in a sense in terms, at least on the immediate level, because it's going to draw other powers, other players.
So the Americans and the Israelis are saying that they killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Iran is denying that, but Iran's state media is reporting that Khamenei's daughter and grandchild were killed. How significant would it be if the top guy that basically runs the country, and he was the supreme leader, every single decision in terms of domestic and foreign policy had to be approved by Iran's supreme leader? He had a lot of critics and a lot of opposition inside Iran, outside of Iran, seen as a brutal leader, and a lot of Iranians wanted him gone. But as we know, regime change or change in government is not easy, especially in a country like Iran. Moving ahead, how much of a blow is this for this country, especially with a potential power vacuum, Edmund?
Exactly. I think this is a very important point. I think the targeting of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, I think, is psychologically important, politically important, because this is basically what Israel or the United States then would say, that the leaders, the dictator is gone. So now it's the time for new leadership to emerge. And I think another indication of this, and that's what makes it dangerous, is that apparently there are also other targets in Iran. Among them, the former President Ahmadinejad, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, the head director of the intelligence in Iran. We don't know if they were hit or not. There were also the commander of the Revolutionary Guard. And so as a result of this, we are going to see a heightening of tension. They believe that Iran, if these leaders are gone, it's going to be difficult to have a new leader, or unless it's one of the leaders that the U.S. would agree to. I mean, already we're hearing from Reza Pahlavi, and we're hearing from the leader of the Mujahideen Khalq, asking people to go to the streets and to ask for support.
And that group does not have support inside Iran, I have to tell you that. All right, we're going to take a short break and be right back.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhino?
Isolation. Frequent signals of potential intervention from the US and Israel put Tehran at its most uncertain moment in decades. Widespread protests and unrest reveal the harsh realities of everyday survival. Oil, once the lifeblood sustaining this country, has not succeeded in propelling the economy amid debilitating sanctions. Even as energy production continues, much of Iran's crude is sold at deep discounts, routed through indirect channels and settled in local currencies, severely constraining its foreign exchange earnings. As a result, a growing shadow economy, built on smuggling, underground finance, and informal trade, remains largely untraceable and fiscally ineffective for the state. Every move by Iran now teeters between civilizational legacy and survival instincts. The fate of this civilizational fortress carries consequences for the security of the entire world.
the people of Iran. Denials from Tehran. It says both Khamenei and President Masoud Pezeshkian are in fact safe and sound, but Iranian media reports Khamenei's daughter and grandchild were killed, along with a number of other civilians, including school children. Now, Trump announced the operation after weeks of repeated threats and a massive military buildup in the region. Tehran is now striking Israel and U.S. bases in the region, the crisis threatening a broader regional conflict. We are covering the story on all fronts from all corners of the globe. Let's go to Walter Morris. Walter, you've been at the White House all day. What is the latest there?
Well, Asiye, as you mentioned, U.S. President Donald Trump in a lengthy social media post saying the supreme leader of Iran is dead and saying the bombing will continue. Now, Trump describing this as the greatest opportunity for the people of Iran to take back their country. And throughout the day, the White House has been updating the list of world leaders that President Trump has spoken to. We're told he's had conversations with the leaders of the UK, Turkey, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. We're also told that President Trump, or that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, reportedly monitored the strikes from the Situation Room here at the White House. Now, we're also told that Secretary of State Marco Rubio reached out to several members of Congress known as the Gang of Eight, and we're told he was only able to brief 7 of them overnight as those strikes began. Of course, President Trump arriving at his Mar-a-Lago estate late Friday evening, and then just a few hours later, that social media post, that video announcing the strikes. Now, the White House is calling this Operation Epic Fury, and in the 8-minute clip, Trump makes a direct appeal to the Iranian people, telling them to overthrow their country once the strikes are over. Now, the White House has not addressed the recent diplomatic efforts that played out just a couple days ago. Of course, Thursday, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff wrapping up those the third round of indirect talks in Geneva. Mediators there said they had made progress and were planning technical talks this week. However, those strikes beginning less than 48 hours later. Asiye?
And of course, Walter, Democratic leaders very critical of this operation, including New York City's mayor.
Yes, that's right. We've been hearing from Democratic leaders in the House all day, or the House and the Senate all day. Of course, Trump's allies, the Republicans in Capitol Hill, very supportive, but many Democrats, many prominent Democrats, now calling for the president to brief Congress. And as you mentioned, the mayor of New York also weighing in. Take a listen.
Today's military strikes by the United States and Israel mark a catastrophic escalation in an illegal act of war, of aggression. Bombing cities, killing civilians, opening up a new theater of war. Americans do not want this.
We did see a statement from Senator Tim Kaine. He wrote, "These strikes are a colossal mistake, and I pray they do not cost our sons and daughters in uniform and at embassies throughout the region their lives. Every single senator needs to go on the record about this dangerous, unnecessary, and idiotic action." The ranking Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, saying, "President Trump has chosen the path of war while diplomacy was still within reach. That is a decision with consequences that will outlast this presidency. I'm calling for an immediate briefing and will use every authority available to conduct rigorous oversight of these operations." Now, meanwhile, we have been seeing a growing number of anti-war protests taking place in several major U.S. cities, one of them New York. Saturday evening, hundreds gathering in Times Square and voicing their opposition to the strikes from the U.S. and Israel against Iran. We also saw hundreds of people marching through the streets here near the White House, and at one point, police blocking traffic to accommodate the crowd. Asiye?
All right, Walter, thank you. Now, Iran says at least 200 people are dead, including children. Nearly 750 others were injured in those attacks. And Iranian media says the supreme leader's daughter and grandchild were killed. They are denying reports that Iran's supreme leader was killed. Now, I spoke to CGTN's Ehsan Kayvani earlier, and I asked him about those reports about Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
some Israeli media as well as Persian language, Iranian television channel, satellite channel reported the news.
Welcome back. We are live from Beijing, updating the latest on joint Israeli and American strikes on Iran. The latest from the ground that Iranian state media reported that Khamenei's daughter and grandchild killed in strikes, and the latest response from Arab League, which calls Israeli-U.S. attacks on Iran a moment when Arab-Israeli conflict have expanded into a full-scale regional war. And meanwhile, New Yorkers protest against the U.S. military attack on Iran. The United States and Israel on Saturday launched coordinated airstrikes against Iran, with the latter responding with a series of attacks on Israel and U.S. targets across the Middle East. Increasing casualties are reported in Iran and other countries involved in the ongoing flare-up. Israeli media reported that Iran's supreme leader Al-Malik Khamenei had been killed, yet Iranian officials said both Khamenei and President Massoud are safe and sound. The latest escalation in this war-torn region has triggered urgent calls for restraint from the international community. And security analysts warn that the conflict risks drawing additional regional powers and impeding critical energy shipping routes through the Gulf. And Israel deployed about 200 fighter jets in what officials described as the largest operational assault in the history of the Israeli Air Force. The strikes, which hit targets in at least 24 of Iran's 31 provinces, were both precise and expensive, according to Israeli officials and security sources. And meanwhile, the primary targets included air base of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, as well as facilities tied to Iran's defense and intelligence ministries. And Israeli media reported attacks on the residence of several ministers and senior military commanders, along with strikes near the compounds of Khamenei and the president. And in the statement, the Israeli military said its aircraft dropped hundreds of munitions on roughly 500 targets, including air defense systems and missile launchers across multiple locations. And the U.S. President Donald Trump said the strikes were intended to eliminate an imminent threat from Iran and press for a change in Israeli Republic's leadership. In an 8-minute video posted on social media Saturday, the President of the United States described the action as a response to nearly half a century of Iranian hostility. He said that namely the United States and Israel target is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. And Trump also added that Tehran's actions directly endanger the United States, their troops, their bases overseas, and their allies. And actually, Trump went beyond the traditional Tehran's rhetoric, using Iranians to seize the opportunity to take control of their government. And of course, shortly after the strikes began, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu released a video statement confirming Israel's participation and echoing Trump's call for a change in power in Iran. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry condemned the strikes as renewed military aggression, noting they came amid ongoing diplomatic engagement. And Iranian state media noted that it was the second time Washington had launched attacks during negotiations, following a 12-day war in June 2025 that ended with U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Trump had turned his America First slogan into Israel First. And shortly after Israel and the United States launched the attack, Iran vowed to mount a crushing retaliation. Within hours, Tehran launched missile strikes toward Israel and the U.S. military installations in several Arab states. Air raid sirens played across Israel as residents took shelter. The Israeli military said its air defense were intercepting incoming missiles and that Israeli warplanes were targeting threats to neutralize them. And Iran's armed forces declared that all American military bases in the region were legitimate targets. According to Iran's semi-official foreign news agency, Tehran struck military installations in several Arab nations hosting U.S. forces, including Qatar, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And Iranian media citing an IRGC official reported that 14 bases had been hit and that hundreds of American soldiers had been killed. And meanwhile, the U.S. military denied the report, saying no American troops were killed or wounded. And the latest from the ground is that Iranian state media reported Khamenei's daughter and grandchild killed in strikes. And latest response from the Arab League, which calls Israeli-U.S. strikes on Iran a moment when the Arab-Israeli conflict has expanded into a full-scale regional war. As the crisis escalated, countries across the region moved to close their airspace entirely or partially, and multiple airlines cancelled flights to the Middle East. International hubs like Dubai and Doha were also closed. In Israel, schools, non-essential businesses, and large gatherings were suspended. At least 2 buildings in the Greater Tel Aviv region have been hit by Iranian missiles. So far, the 6 in Israel have been reported wounded. In Kuwait, the defense ministry said 3 members of its armed forces were injured after debris fell at Ali al-Asama base in the country's northwest, which had earlier been targeted by Iran ballistic missile attacks. And the UAE state media said 1 person had been killed, but gave no details, while 8 were reportedly injured in Qatar, with 1 in critical conditions. And the latest from the ground is that Iranian state media reported Khamenei's daughter and a grandchild killed in strikes. Meanwhile, New Yorkers protest against the U.S. military attack on Iran. And during the past 12 hours, Iran says 201 killed, 747 wounded in attacks, while Israel confirms first death in missile strikes by Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump said Saturday that Iran's supreme leader Khamenei was killed in U.S.-Israeli attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday evening said in a video statement that there are increasing signs that the leader is gone, while Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said the same day earlier that the country's supreme leader is safe and sound. The swift escalation has promoted a wave of concerns and calls for restraint and dialogue from across the globe. China is highly concerned over military strikes against Iran launched by the United States and Israel. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a press release, stressing that Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity should be respected. Meanwhile, in a telephone conversation with his Iranian counterpart, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denounced what he called an unprovoked armed attack and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Dmitry Medvedev, a former Russian president, took aim at Trump, saying the leader, who has long cast himself as a peacemaker, has shown his true colors. Omani Foreign Minister said, who has served as a mediator in recent Iranian and American negotiations, expressed dismay at the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the escalating violence, saying the U.S. and Israeli strikes, along with Iran's regional retaliation, undermine international peace and security. He called on all parties to return immediately to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran. The Houthi leader voices solidarity with Iran, says ready for any developments. European leaders urges the protection of civilians. For example, the European Council President Antonio Costa and the European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen said that developments related to Iran were greatly concerning. urging all sides to exercise maximum restraint, while multiple Democratic lawmakers on Saturday slammed President Trump for launching massive military attacks against Iran without Congress war power authorization, saying the operation raises serious legal and constitutional concerns. The latest escalation in this war-torn region has triggered urgent calls for restraint from the international community. Of course, security analysts warn that the conflict risks drawing additional regional powers and impeding critical energy shipping routes through the Gulf. Experts said there are increased risks that major powers could be drawn into reactive crisis management rather than strategic conflict resolution, which would have long-standing efforts on international security and stability. For more, let's take a look at the video footage from CGTN.
Resume dialogue and negotiations as soon as possible and return to the right track of a political solution.
The U.S. ambassador defended American action.
The international community has long affirmed a simple and necessary principle. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That principle is not a matter of politics, it's a matter of global security. And to that end, the United States is taking lawful actions.
Condemnation for the strikes and Iran's retaliation came from every corner of the globe. Oman's foreign minister, after wrapping up the latest round of indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran earlier this week, said on X, "I am dismayed. Active and serious negotiations have yet again been undermined. Neither the interest of the United greatly concerning." She called on all parties to use maximum restraint at a time of high tensions. Karina Mitchell, CGTN, New York.
And we'll be back after a short break. Stay with us.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in,
a growing shadow economy built on smuggling, underground finance and informal trade remains largely untraceable and fiscally ineffective for the state. Every move by Iran now teeters between civilizational legacy and survival instincts. The fate of this civilizational fortress carries consequences for the security of the entire world.
Hundreds have been injured. Iran also has dismissed reports Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has been killed. Ehsan Kevani joins us live on the phone. Ehsan, is there any more information about whether Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is dead or alive? The Americans and the Israelis are saying he, in fact, has been killed.
That's right. We've had a lot of reports on Israeli and American media about the Supreme Leader's death, but unfortunately, so far, we've had no official reactions or reports about it. Sources close to the leader, including some members of his family, have denied these reports, saying that these are all kind of psychological war performed by the Western countries, and some websites aligned with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also denied the reports. We should wait maybe for more few hours to see the official reaction of the government in the morning.
And what is the latest on the strikes in Iran, the casualties and the injuries?
Yes, as you said, at least 200 people have been killed across the country and 700 people have been injured. The fatality in the southern port city of Bandar Abbas, close to Bandar Abbas, in a primary school, has been 118 people, with dozens more injured. One point I would like to add is that we have confirmed report that the Supreme Leader's daughter, his son-in-law, and his grandson have been killed. This is a confirmed report so far.
Oh, grandson or granddaughter?
Grandson, as we heard in official news.
For the Iranians to prove that Iran's Supreme Leader is not dead, do you expect them to show him at some point on television? And then how do we know if images of him would be new video or old ones? Ehsan? I think we lost Ehsan Kevani, who was joining us on the phone, but internet connection is also, we should say, very spotty right now. Well, as we've been telling you, Iranian missiles hit a number of GCC countries, Bahrain, UAE, Jordan, and Kuwait. Some were intercepted, some were not. Reports are coming about an incident at Abu Dhabi International Airport, which resulted in injuries and at least one fatality. And the 5-star luxury Fairmont Hotel in Dubai was also among those structures hit. We've been talking to Inzamam Rashid, who once again joins us live from Dubai. And Inzamam, this really has been a day of chaos and terror for the people of United Arab Emirates, especially those living in Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, look, I think right across the GCC, Asia, to be fair, you know, we've seen all of the GCC countries be attacked by Iran, bar one, Oman. And I think that's quite significant, given Oman were the country that brokered the negotiation discussions in Geneva over the last few days, which clearly were unsuccessful. But you're right, here in the UAE, a country which prides itself on safety, on security, has seen some of its most darkest hours and darkest day because of what has happened here over the last 24 hours, a barrage of Iranian missiles and drones targeting Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and specifically the US bases in both those cities. Let's start off with Abu Dhabi. It was there where Iran struck initially, targeting the large US airbase that is in Abu Dhabi, where we've seen US military assets increasing over the last few weeks. The UAE defense systems were kicked into action, and they intercepted a number of those Iranian missiles and drones, but unfortunately debris falling from the sky caused a lot of damage on the ground in Abu Dhabi. In one incident, there was an explosion which killed one South Asian man and injured others as well. Tonight also, we've seen Abu Dhabi airport has been struck by Iran. A drone targeting the airport specifically has killed a man and injured 7 others. Moving over here to Dubai, and again we've seen a number of incidents, namely debris falling from the sky and hitting the ground here and causing huge explosions. Firstly, the Fairmont Hotel, as you mentioned, on Palm Jumeirah, a 5-star hotel, hugely populated with tourists from all around the world. That was struck, a huge explosion there, which actually created impact to the neighbors across the street from the hotel and some of the surrounding hotels as well. That was completely evacuated as a result. We haven't heard whether there's been any serious injuries or casualties as a result of that explosion, but it's something that we'll find out in the morning, I'm sure. And then we go to Dubai airports. The airport here, the busiest airport in the world, targeted as well. 4 people injured there as a result of a strike on Dubai International Airport. And then I think probably the most significant strikes that we've seen here in the UAE, just over my shoulder, Jebel Ali Port. This is where there are a number of US Navy assets parked up, waiting to be used and deployed if needs be. But that's where Iran have been targeting, especially in the late hours of Saturday evening and early hours of Sunday. I've heard a number of explosions taking place in Dubai South over Jebel Ali. We've seen the interception, we've seen debris falling down. We've also seen a number of missiles or drones actually reaching the Jebel Ali port, and in the distance all this evening and in the early hours of this morning, we've seen smoke billowing from Jebel Ali, a lot of fire there as well. So there has been a lot of action on the ground here in the UAE. I can just tell you what the Ministry of Defense has announced as well. They've said that Iran launched around 137 ballistic missiles and 209 drones towards the UAE. They've said that the UAE intercepted 132 of those missiles and 195 drones, and they suggest that only 14 in total got through and caused damage. But of course, that doesn't include the amount of damage that the debris has caused across this country as well. So look, it's been a very tense day for the people of the UAE. As I mentioned, a country which prides itself on safety and security, and there are a number of expats, foreigners, who have been really worrying over the last 24 hours or so, and actually trying to find a route to get out of the UAE now, a country which they feel is not safe as a result of these Iranian attacks. But of course, the airspace above us closed, those airports being targeted as well, so a way out for many may be quite difficult.
Inzamam, are you getting the sense that the Iranians warned United Arab Emirates before firing these drones and missiles?
Look, I think it was pretty clear that Iran was going to target US bases. That's something that's been in discussion for a long time. Analysts in this region have been talking about that. Once the US and Israel would attack Iran, it's likely that US bases would be targeted, and we've seen a huge buildup of military assets at those US bases. We've also known that the Gulf nations have been ramping up their air defense systems in order to make sure they create a safe environment for the people that live here. I do believe that that Abu Dhabi would have known or would have expected a strike towards the US military base there. I think it came as a bit of a shock to not just the UAE, but also specifically the people that actually live here, that Iran would target Dubai specifically. There are 2 smaller US bases here in Dubai, which actually not many people know about, but Iran was specifically trying to target them. And then, of course, the Jebel Ali port over here as well, which I didn't think that people knew there were a huge number of US Navy assets parked up at Jebel Ali port. So that was a bit of a concern as well. You know, when you compare Dubai to Abu Dhabi, of course, being the capital, but Dubai absolutely packed with tourists all year round. It's got around 200 nationalities living in this city and usually get on pretty well. So I think an attack on Dubai over the last 24 hours has come as a real shock to the people who live here, but also the UAE government.
Inzamam Rashid, once again, thank you so much. Well, the strikes could have major implications for the Gulf region. Now let's go to Adil Mahrouhi, who joins us live from Cairo. Adil, what more can you tell us about how countries like Egypt are responding, if they are at all?
Well, so far Egypt's engagement has been mainly diplomatic. The Egyptian president has been on phone calls with all the leaders of the Arab countries whose airspace has been breached by Iranian missiles and drone. That is from Jordan to Saudi Arabia, which also announced being targeted. At least 2 cities, including the capital Riyadh, have been targeted by Iranian missiles, according to the royal court there. And beside that, he also spoke to the president of the UAE, the Emir of Qatar, the King of Bahrain, and the Emir of Kuwait, all to make sure that Egypt stand by them. It stands against any attempt to breach their sovereignty and airspace from Iran, no matter what reason that is. This was the firm stance from the Egyptian government. At the same time, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry called for the cessation of hostilities, and it called for resumption of diplomatic efforts, as Cairo believes it's the only way to achieve sustainable peace in the region, specifically when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. Cairo has been also quite invested in mediating between Tehran and the United Nations Atomic Energy Association, the IAEA. It brokered the deal a couple of months ago, but that collapsed as pressure has been put on Iran by Western countries, Europe and the United States. So in general, beside these diplomatic efforts, Egypt is not most likely it's not going to get engaged, especially when the countries being targeted, the Arab countries that have been targeted, have not responded yet, though they said they will hold tight to the right to fire back or to retaliate as the right for the attacks on their nations.
All right, Adil. So many questions, so many concerns at this point. Thank you. Now let's bring in Klaus Lars. He's a professor of history and international affairs at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Professor, how worried are you about a risk of escalation at this point?
I'm very much worried about it. I think everyone is worried about an escalating war which encapsulates the entire region. Hopefully that will not happen, but Iran's attacks on countries' civilian targets, like in Kuwait and and the other targets you just reported about in Dubai, the airport in Dubai and Kuwait, that doesn't look very promising that a wider war can be avoided. It also doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense for Iran to antagonize its potential allies and supporters in the region, because all these Arab countries have advised the Trump administration not to get involved in a war on Iran, and they actually have refused overflight rights to the United States. And Iran is now kind of pushing them almost to the side of the United States. And I can only conclude the reason why is because Iran wants to widen the war, to drive oil prices up, to make it really turn it into economic chaos in order to put pressure on the United States and Israel to then finish the war kind of quickly.
Was the United States ever interested in a diplomatic solution or in diplomacy with Iran? Was there anything Iran could have said in negotiations in Geneva that would have averted this strike?
That is difficult to know. Trump has said that he wanted to hear the words from Iran that they will never, ever want to have nuclear
But they've
weapons.
said that. They've said that.
Exactly. In fact, they'd said that several times, despite the opposite claim of President Trump. So it's very difficult to know whether anything the Iranians could have done and offered in negotiations would have pacified Trump and Israel. My feeling is that regime change eventually came onto the table after the protests in December and January in Iran, in Tehran above all, which were brutally suppressed by the Iranian regime. 30,000 protesters seem to have been killed. And I think that turned the table for Trump and possibly Israel as well. And that made them decide that regime change was what they wanted and no other solution was acceptable. But I don't know for sure. I think it's a big question.
Yeah, and if this conflict drags on, what are the potential potential global consequences from oil markets to commercial aviation and really broader geopolitical alignments. We already live in a very, very divided, polarized world. This could make things even worse.
Absolutely. You know, the economic consequences of the war, of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the oil prices will escalate. Inflation will definitely escalate. Stock markets will probably collapse or at least significantly go down. But my suspicion is that Trump doesn't want to have a war which goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks, that after a couple of days, he may want to call it quits. He wants to take out the senior leaders, all of the senior leaders, or as many as he can get, and then hope that the population of Iran does the job for him, that they rise up and they replace the regime. Because as we know, he has not planned to put any ground troops into Iran, and I don't think Israel has planned that. And to topple a regime, to really have regime change just by airstrikes will be extremely difficult unless the population does the job for him. And that is probably what he hopes. So I can see that after a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days at most, that the war will cease from the American point of view. And of course, when we look at America's domestic opinion and the MAGA movement, the Trump supporters, they don't want to get involved in a prolonged war in the Middle East. So Trump has to take that into consideration. Of course, we have an election year, though the midterm elections are only in November. It's March now, or almost March now. Then, people forget. 6 months is a long time, or longer than 6 months is a long time before the election. So I don't think that the Iran war, unless it goes on and on and on, will actually have that much of an impact on the midterm elections in the United States.
All right, Professor, thank you so much. Edmund Gharib, let me give you the final word. You've been with us the last few hours. We so appreciate all your take, all your wisdom. You are a Middle East expert, and my final question to you is, what kind of precedent could what we've seen with these attacks by United States and Israel, does it set any kind of precedent when it comes to unilateral military strikes in the future? It could give other countries and other states ammunition to do the same and say, see, they're doing it, why can't we do it?
Absolutely, and I think this is a very important point. One of the main things is the policies which have been pursued by the United States government towards the region are already the people in the whole Middle East, there's a great deal of negative reactions toward the United States. Historically, the U.S. has been like a dream for many people in the region. There are many people who came to the United States, but now when they see this policy of what they see as intervention, we're having one way of dealing with Israel and another way of dealing with others. We see, for example...
Double standard, in other words.
Double standard, triple standard. I think this is something that's extremely important. What we have seen recently, for example, the statement that was made by the U.S. ambassador to Israel in an interview with Tucker Carlson, where he said, Israel can annex the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, part of Iraq, Syria, the part of Saudi Arabia. This is 14 countries.
Yeah.
And these are mostly all of them allies of the United States. This is unless we see a real change. It seems that the U.S. seems to be supporting Israel, right or wrong. And this is turning a lot of people off. We have historically, after 1948, what happened in Palestine. We saw the beginning of coups all over the Middle East. We saw the first coup in Syria, then coup in Egypt, then in Iraq, then in Libya, and many, many countries. We saw this happening. So basically, I think this is something important. The other point is, I think the United States, one of the aims, and to a certain extent Israel wanted to see weak countries in the Middle East, countries that are preoccupied, divided along ethnic or religious lines, sectarian lines. At the same time that they are doing that, the U.S. is also concerned that the era of the unipolar world is over.
Yeah. Edmund, I'm so sorry, but we're out of time. Thank you so much, Edmund Gharib. And just a quick recap of our top story, U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. It came after weeks of threats, a massive military buildup in the Persian Gulf. President Donald Trump announced it in overnight hours. Tehran has retaliated, striking Israel and U.S. bases. President Donald Trump says Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has been killed. He announced it on his social media page, calling it justice for the people of Iran. Denials from Tehran, but Iran says Khamenei's daughter and grandson were killed. President Pezeshkian is believed to be safe and sound. We're going to keep an eye on the story and bring you the latest with our colleagues from Beijing. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I'm Asiye Namdar in Washington.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime.
After 9:30 in the morning in Tehran, we heard the sound of fighter jet, at least one fighter jet in Tehran's sky. After that, we heard 2 or 3 big explosions, and following the incident, there was a huge smoke in the south of Tehran, or almost southwest of Tehran. Israeli officials have apparently confirmed the attack against Tehran. We don't have any official reports yet, but some sources say the presidential palace or the leader's residence in the center of Tehran have been hit.
Iran is more than just a country. It is a millennia-old city.
Hey, I'm Kasturi Manikam. Our top story this hour: the United States and Israel have attacked Iran at a massive operation that President Donald Trump says killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Now, Tehran has not confirmed Trump's claims. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there are increasing signs that Khamenei is gone, adding that strikes on Iran, which began on Saturday, will continue as long as necessary. Now, Iran's Red Crescent Society says at least 201 deaths and 747 injuries have been reported across the country. Now, let's go to Tehran, where our correspondent Ehsan Kevani is standing by live for us. Ehsan, we hear explosions in Tehran this morning. What's the situation now?
Well, in the early hours of Saturday morning, the initial attacks started and followed by more explosions during the day. It's almost 5 a.m. here in Tehran. Less than 1 hour ago, we had fresh rounds of explosions and huge sounds in Tehran. And different parts of Tehran have been hit by Israeli and maybe American strikes. And a few minutes ago, this is the big news, a few minutes ago, finally, I received the confirmed report that Iran's supreme leader was killed in Saturday morning attack. So this news is now official and confirmed by Iran's officials and politicians. Yeah.
Now, what are the implications of this now? Khamenei has been confirmed dead. What's going to happen now?
Well, according to Iran's constitution, as soon as the leader passes away, there is an assembly of experts whose responsibility is to choose a new leader. So if they want to act according to the constitution, as soon as possible, maybe on Sunday, this assembly is gathering to choose the new leader. But under the war situation, the story might be different, and Iran's constitution says that under the war situation, a group of 3 people, including the president, the head of the judiciary, and one member of the Guardian Council will temporarily hold the responsibility of leading the country until the situation is suitable for the assembly of experts to choose the leader.
Now, Ehsan, you are on the ground, and you have been covering this attack since yesterday. What is on the? What do you feel like? Are Iranians? Do they think will a regime change happen, as Trump has been calling for?
Well, in fact, there are different views among the Iranian people. There is a large group of people who are angry with the government and its performance during the years, especially referring to economic shortages, sanctions, and other problematic issues. On the other hand, there's another group of people who still support the government, and they think that a regime change, especially with the people they're talking about as the possible future leaders of Iran, this is not a story that's going to work for Iran. So we have a split of ideas among the people at the moment.
Now, Ehsan, we are also hearing in the early hours of the morning that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, a major oil export route. What are the implications of this?
This was announced and emphasized by the late supreme leader, as well as the many military commanders and other politicians in Iran, that they always warned and threatened that if the situation gets really dangerous, Iran will definitely close the Strait of Hormuz. As you know, more than 20% of the global energy passes through the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, and if the closure is supposed to continue, it's going to have really huge effects on global prices worldwide.
Now, Ehsan, dozens were also killed in an attack at a girls' school in southern Iran. What do you know of that attack?
Unfortunately, it was a primary school for girls in a small town named Minab, which is close to the southern port city of Bandar Abbas. During the attack, so far, according to the official statistics, at least 118 people have been killed. Most of them are schoolgirls and also their teachers, and dozens are injured. And the fatality is expected to rise because the rescue teams were still trying to take out the bodies from under the debris.
Iran has launched an unprecedented wave of strikes towards Israel and U.S. Targets across the Middle East. Explosions have been reported in the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar and Bahrain. Tell us more about those operations. Does Iran plan to continue these attacks?
Well, according to what Iranian military commanders say, they will continue these attacks as long as it is necessary, because they say they have a huge arsenal of drones and missiles that would be enough to launch against Israel and American bases for several days. Striking Israel, especially for Iranian people, is not something new. June last year, in another occasion, we had such strikes from Iran against Israel. But what is really shocking for the Iranian people is to see that Iran has launched unprecedented and major attacks against some locations in the Persian Gulf, including Dubai and Qatar. So this is a huge shock for Iranian people as well.
Now, Ehsan, you did say, Iranians are shocked. They must have been preparing for this day to come. But like you said, it's still a shock. How are they coping? Is it easy to get basic necessities?
Well, in the early hours of Saturday morning when the strikes started, the entire highways and streets across Tehran were totally packed and cars were moving literally inches by inches. And after that, we had long lines in gas stations. People were rushing to go to schools to pick up their children, to see their loved ones. And after that, we had a wave of people trying to evacuate Tehran and going to safer locations. But in the afternoon, things got calmer. And in the evening, I can say that all the streets were really quiet.
Now, we also saw images from Tehran showing cars jammed along the street as people were trying to leave. What's happening?
Well, those images are about Saturday morning until around noon. But as I told you, now Tehran seems to be very quiet. As I know, a large number of people have already evacuated Tehran. The others are trying to stay at home. Schools and universities are all closed until the further notice by the government, and the offices are almost closed for several days. And I'm sure that because of the leader's death, we're going to have national mourning for several days. In general, people are in panic, and they really don't know what's going to happen to them next.
Now, if you're just joining us on CGTN, Iran's state media has confirmed that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been killed by U.S.-Israeli strikes. Ehsan, what are you learning on this?
In the initial hours, all the state media and official sources try to deny the reports. And Saturday evening, we even had the news that a televised speech is going to be aired on state television. But we waited for several hours. We didn't see anything. And it was just a few minutes ago that the report was, in fact, confirmed. Another thing I would like to add is that we have confirmed reports that the Supreme Leader's daughter, the Supreme Leader's son-in-law, and his grandson have also been killed during the attacks. Most probably they were inside the Supreme Leader's residence when the attack occurred on Saturday morning.
Now, Ehsan, I know this report just came in that Khamenei has been killed. How do you think Iranians will react to this news?
Well, honestly speaking, Saturday morning, it was around 9:30 a.m. that we heard the huge explosions. And after that, people rushed to the rooftops or their balconies, and they saw that huge cloud of smoke coming from downtown Tehran. Almost all the people could guess that it was the Supreme Leader's residence that was targeted. And the main question that everybody had in mind at that moment is that whether the Supreme Leader has been targeted or not.
Ehsan, there will be 40 days of mourning for Khamenei. It has just been released. Tell us more about that. What can we expect?
Well, as I told you, the most important thing that we can expect is the election of the new Supreme Leader. But As I said, under the current circumstances that we are under, strikes by U.S. or Israel, there might be some adjustments or to delay that kind of election. And I think for the next coming days, President Pezeshkian will be in charge of the country until the new leader will be chosen by the Assembly of Experts.
Ehsan, thank you very much for your live report. Ehsan Kevani reporting there from Tehran on this developing situation where Iran's state media has just confirmed that Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been killed by U.S.-Israeli strikes on Tehran. There will be 40 days of mourning on this. Now let's take a quick look at Iran's supreme leader. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei was born in 1939 in Mashhad, Iran. He held the position of the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran since June 1989, following the death of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who spearheaded the Islamic Revolution a decade earlier. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Khamenei held key roles, including Defense Deputy Minister, Revolutionary Guard Commander, and Iran's president from 1981 to 1989. His leadership is rooted in Iran's theocratic system as enshrined in the constitution, which grants him ultimate authority over state policies and key institutions. In recent public addresses, Khamenei emphasized national unity and resistance against external interference, particularly amid regional tensions. I want to bring in our correspondent, Jagriti Dave, who joins us from Washington. Jagriti, we just heard from Iran's state media that Khamenei has been killed. What are you learning on this?
Well, I think we're getting this information just coming in from Iran's state media, as you say, confirming those reports from Israel and from U.S. media that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, has been killed in those strikes. We know that strikes were taking place around Leadership House, the main building housing Iran's leadership. We also understand from state media that Khamenei's daughter and son-in-law and grandchild were also killed in the attacks. That was from state news, Far News Agency, before Iran state media confirmed that the supreme leader himself had been killed in these strikes.
Now, we also hear protests across the U.S. condemning the attack. How's the situation now?
Yeah, across the United States and cities like D.C. here and the U.S. Capitol, New York, hundreds of people came out to protest the conflict, anti-war protesters gathering in Washington near the White House and other major monuments like the Washington Monument. We had a lot of people angry at U.S. unilateral action. There were signs with people saying no bombs on Iran. But also, conversely, we also saw people celebrating the action, celebrating the overthrow of Iran's leadership in cities like LA. The AFP were reporting celebrations from the Iranian diaspora. So as with the action in Venezuela, there was criticism and condemnation of the strikes, which resulted in the capture of Nicolas Maduro. But there we also saw the Venezuelan diaspora, many of those in places like Florida, celebrating the overthrowing of Maduro. And in a similar fashion here, we're seeing mixed reaction.
Now, Trump has been calling for a regime change in Tehran, telling Iranians the hour of your freedom is at hand. With Khamenei being killed now in the U.S.-Israel strike, is this a possibility? Tell us what else Trump has said so far.
In his 8-minute video, Donald Trump called on Iranians to overthrow their government. And in his announcement of Khamenei's death on Truth Social, Donald Trump called this the greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. His justification for entering into an attack on Iran was not just Iran's position on nuclear negotiations and his desire to prevent Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. He also talked broadly by that call to the Iranian people to overthrow the government of regime change, but also to narrowly to prevent Iran from using its missiles on U.S. troops, which we understand that the U.S. intelligence believes that is what Iran was planning to do. And so there is a broad sense that the U.S. goals for this were not just about nuclear weapons, but also about broader regime change in Iran. And obviously with the death of the supreme leader, that change, that historic change is in motion. What happens next? Well, in an interview with CBS News, Donald Trump was asked if he knows who is running Iran, and he said he does, but he can't say. He says he has an idea for who he wants to run Iran, but it's a different situation to Venezuela, where he said the US is running things in Venezuela. The US influence in Iran is different. Some experts say that it's not possible to effect regime change in a simple fashion because of the Iranian system. It's not just dependent on one leader. It's dependent on a network. It's the military alongside the political leadership, the council of experts. There's a whole network which means that it's very difficult to topple the current leadership in the same way that perhaps that it was easy to depose Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. So the other thing is that a lot of experts are saying that it's difficult to effect change through a bombing campaign alone. That can encourage dissatisfaction amongst local people, especially if, as we're hearing reports of a school being hit, civilian casualties does not engender admiration in a local population for a foreign attacker. So it's a very complex situation, but what we are seeing is unprecedented change in Iran.
Now, Jagriti, nonetheless, the United States is reportedly planning for several days of attacks. Any word from the Trump administration on how this will be carried out?
I think you're seeing experts saying that this is not just a single isolated incident. We saw last June Operation Midnight Hammer, which took out Iranian nuclear infrastructure. But as we found out later, it wasn't a complete obliteration, as the Trump administration was suggesting. The Iranians were able to rebuild. It was a blow to their nuclear facilities, but it wasn't an entire obliteration of them. And here, this particular attack, Donald Trump is saying that, again, in media interviews during the day, that this could be the US could be in for the long run, or it could be done. These attacks could be done in a few days. So we're not sure exactly how long this could be. It's going to have to be a wait and see situation. But I think experts are worried in some sense that this could signal a protracted involvement by the United States, even though members of the Trump administration are trying to reassure people who are concerned about prolonged US involvement in the Middle East that would not be the case.
The Trump administration will probably face a growing pressure from Congress to justify this operation. How do you think this will play out?
Yes, already we're hearing from Democrats, but also some Republicans calling on Congress to push through with a war powers resolution to limit the president's ability to make unilateral actions as has happened in Iran and as happened with Venezuela. But previous attempts to do so following Venezuela failed because the Republicans have a slim majority in both chambers of Congress, and so any attempts to push through a war powers resolution failed ultimately, despite some Republicans sharing Democratic skepticism, concerns about the executive taking unilateral unilateral action abroad without consulting Congress, as has happened in this instance. However, we are also seeing some Republicans, like Senator Lindsey Graham, applauding the president, saying that his speech that he gave in that 8-minute video will go down in history as the catalyst for the most historic change in the Middle East in 1,000 years. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, is trying to reassure those concerns, saying that that before the attack, Secretary Rubio called all members of the Gang of Eight, that is the top congressional leadership that's required by law to be informed of any strikes of this kind, that they were contacted to provide congressional notification, that Marco Rubio was able to reach 7 of 8 of those members of the Gang of Eight. And so I think further questions are going to be asked about the constitutionality and the legality of this action that was conducted without congressional approval.
Jagriti, I would like to thank you for your live report as well. Jagriti Dave in Washington, D.C. And if you're joining us on CGTN, we're covering day 2 of U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran. And this is what we know. Iran's state media has confirmed that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been killed in the U.S.-Israel strikes. I want to bring in Jonathan Regev, who's standing by live for us in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, you just heard Iran's state media has confirmed that Khamenei has been killed. What information do you have on this?
Yes, so this fact has been approved now by the Iranian state media, but as far as Israel is concerned, Israeli officials confirmed this a few hours ago already, and even before that, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu strongly hinted at that in his statement last night, saying that Israel, in the opening act of this war, one of the sites that was attacked was the residence of the Iranian supreme leader, and that all signs indicate that he was killed. Just moments later came the actual official confirmation, and Israel is saying loud and clear. Israel says that it wants to see a different regime controlling Iran once this war is over. This is something that the United States did not really say. Of course, President Trump is hinting at the possibility, said the United States will be happy, but did not state it as a goal of the war, meaning waking up the morning after the war with a different government in Iran. But for Israel, this is something crucial. This is something that Israel wants to see, due to the fact that Israel cannot be living in a situation where every few months there is a round of war with Iran. As successful as Israel may be in these rounds of war, these wars have a very strong effect on the Israeli economy, the Israeli society, the entire Israeli state. And therefore, by killing the top Iranian, the top Iranian figure, being the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, Israel is hoping this is paving the way for another regime, for another government in Iran. But of course, as you discussed, it is not that simple. As important of a figure as the Ayatollah may be, Iran is much more complex than that, and changing a regime just by a military campaign, I think, is something that both Israel and the United States understand that is not possible. That is why we've heard both President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling on the Iranian people to use this moment, this opportunity to work on the ground, simply because strikes on the air, as strong and successful as may be, may not be enough for a regime change.
Jonathan, you've been following this story since yesterday. Do you think there's any possibility Israel could come to the negotiating table at this stage? How long do you think this conflict is going to last?
I think it will last at least a few days. I don't think it will be less than a week or so. Iran may be taking a very strong hits both from Israel and the United States, but the Iranians have showed resilience, meaning even this evening, after everything that Iran has endured for 12 hours or so, it was still able to fire missiles at Israel that inflicted damage and casualties here in Tel Aviv. An Israeli woman was killed, about 20 others were injured, and major damage was reported in a site of a missile that fell in Tel Aviv. As sophisticated as the Israeli systems may be, they do not. There's no such thing as 100% interception, and as long as Iran is able to fire even 2 or 3 missiles in a single barrage, it will do it. I don't see the Iranians giving up so quickly. As strong as the pressure from the United States and Israel may be. So at least a few days, I think, of fighting are ahead of us.
Now, Jonathan, let's get a sense of what's happening on the ground in Israel. Israel, we hear, has launched a new wave of strikes early this morning. What are you hearing?
Yes, so a new round of strikes. Israel is mostly looking at the ballistic sites now, the ballistic missile sites in Iran. This is the main concern for Israel. Iran seems to have adopted a different strategy, meaning instead of what we saw in June, meaning very large barrages of tens of missiles at a time, 50, 60, 70 at a time, hoping that at least 2 or 3 or 5 of them are able to go through the interception systems. Now, the Iranians are doing things differently. Very small barrages, 2 or 3 or 5 missiles at a time. The vast majority of them are intercepted. Other than that hit in Tel Aviv that we spoke about, there were no other major hits reported in Israel on the first day of the war. But every such barrage causes sirens, sends millions of people to the shelters. I think I stopped counting at a certain moment, but I think there were at least 20 different sirens here in the Tel Aviv area. Every siren means you run to the shelter, stay there for 10 or 15 minutes until the home front command tells you can leave. And then as soon as you leave, another siren comes in. That has quite a strong psychological effect. And therefore, it is not easy, even if we only speak at this time of one serious missile that hit, only one incident of this kind. The psychological effect of running time and time again to shelters is quite difficult on the society, on the people here.
This must be very traumatizing for Israelis as well. I mean, you mentioned Israel has, there have been people who are injured from Iran's strike on Israel. Is there any difficulty getting basic amenities, petrol, for instance, water, food?
So I have to say the answer is no. Even after many hours walking into supermarkets, there was no shortage of anything. And judging by the experience of June, there was no real shortage at the time. It wasn't as if basic needs were never. There was never any shortage of them. On the first day of the war, it was a Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, meaning all of the big chains, the big supermarket chains were closed. But the smaller chains, the communal chains were all open. No major shortages were reported. In the early hours of Saturday morning, a lot of people, of course, rushed to the supermarkets, understanding that war has begun and it's time to perhaps have water and other basic needs. But other than that, I don't think we're speaking of major shortages. And again, we can rely on the experience of the past war in June, where eventually, apart from a few things missing here and there were no major shortages of any basic needs.
Jonathan, how do you see Israel's strategy from last June to this attack? How has it changed? Is there any difference?
One very big difference now is that Israel is not acting on its own. It's acting along with the United States. And the effects of that are already felt on the first day, meaning Iran is now in war not only with Israel, but also with the United States and maybe with other Gulf countries as well. We saw Iran striking in Bahrain, in the United Arab Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar. All these countries, mostly Sunni, Muslim Sunni countries, could now also be in some kind of war with Iran as well. Iran said that it is not targeting these countries' civilian installations, but rather American bases, which are located all across the area. But the fact that the U.S. is also part of this war is also, of course, generating a major change and allowing Israel to focus only on Iran's ballistic missile sites, allowing the United States to deal with the nuclear sites, which is also a major headache.
Now, flights across the Middle East were cancelled after Saturday's attacks. Any indication when they will resume?
No, not for the time being.